I found out on a Sunday afternoon in October, sitting at my parents' kitchen table with a cup of coffee I hadn't touched, while my father explained, in the careful, measured tone he used for things he had already decided, that they had updated their will, that my sister, Lauren, would be receiving the house, the savings, the investments, that I would be receiving nothing, that this was because I didn't need it. I sat with that for a moment. The coffee steamed. The kitchen clock ticked. My mother was looking at the window. Then I stood up, put on my coat, and left. I did not raise my voice. I did not cry. I did not ask them to reconsider or explain themselves further, or tell me what exactly they believed I needed or didn't need, and how they had arrived at that assessment without asking me. I walked to my car. I drove home. I did not speak to my parents for 6 years. My name is Miriam Osei. I'm 41 years old. And the thing I want to tell you is not a story about money. It was never about money. It's a story about what it means to be seen, genuinely, accurately seen, by the people who are supposed to know you best, and about what happens when you stop waiting for that and build the thing yourself. The lawyer's phone call came on a Thursday morning. I'm going to tell you about it, but first I need to tell you what those 6 years looked like from the inside. My parents, James and Ruth Osei, immigrated from Ghana in the late 1970s. My father built a small accounting practice over 30 years. My mother taught middle school mathematics for 2 decades and then retired and taught privately from home. They were not wealthy people in the way that word is used carelessly. They were people who had built something careful and solid and were proud of it in the quiet way of people who remember when there was nothing to be proud of yet. Lauren is 3 years younger than me. She is warm and impulsive and has always needed, in my parents, understanding of the word, more. More attention, more guidance, more intervention. As a child, she struggled in school and my mother tutored her nightly. As a teenager, she made choices that required retrieval, and my parents retrieved her. In her 20s, she went through a divorce, a period of instability, a stretch of years that required what my parents described as support and what I would describe from the outside as the ongoing subsidy of a life that had not yet found its footing. I had found my footing young. This is the cleanest way I know to say it. I was an early reader. I was organized in school without being pushed. I got a scholarship to university, graduated without debt, worked my way into a management consulting position at 24, made director at 31. I had a savings account and a pension and a sensible car and a small house I had bought myself in a neighborhood I liked. I did not call home in crisis. I did not require retrieval. My parents interpreted this as not needing anything. What they did not account for, what I have spent considerable time understanding, not with bitterness, but with the clear-eyed attention I apply to most things, is that needing less is not the same as needing nothing. That competence is not the same as self-sufficiency in every dimension. That the child who does not shout for help still sometimes needs someone to notice she hasn't. I had been the easy child. I had been so consistently easy that my parents had, at some point, stopped checking. And that is a particular kind of loneliness. Not dramatic, not acute, just the low, persistent kind that comes from being so reliably fine that no one ever thinks to ask. I remember, in my early 30s, a conversation with my mother on the phone. I had just been passed over for a promotion I had worked toward for 2 years, not because of performance, because of internal politics. The kind of thing that happens in organizations and is frustrating and real. I told my mother. I expected, what do you expect from a mother? Some version of acknowledgement, some frustration on my behalf. She said, "You'll be fine, Miriam. You always land on your feet." I held the phone and looked at my kitchen ceiling. She was not wrong. I did land on my feet. I always had. But in the gap between what she said and what I needed to hear in that moment, just that moment, not a solution, not a strategy, just someone being frustrated with me rather than for me, I felt very clearly the outline of the problem, the shape of what it meant to be the easy one. She had said I would be fine in the way you say it, about something you are not worried about. She was not worried about me. She had never been worried about me. And being never worried about is its own kind of invisible. The will decision was, in some ways, the honest culmination of a story that had been accumulating for decades. They gave Lauren everything because Lauren had always needed everything. They gave me nothing because I, in their model of the world, did not need anything at all. They were not cruel people. I want to be precise about that because it matters to me to be precise. They were people who had built a mental model of their two daughters and who had acted from within that model without ever pausing to verify it, without asking me at any point whether the model was accurate, without considering that the child who has never asked for retrieval might still sometimes need someone to look up and check. They had decided. They had told me. They had waited, I think, for me to be fine about it. I was not fine about it, and I was done performing fine. People ask me, when I tell this story, whether the 6 years of silence were about the will. They were not about the will. The will was the moment I understood something I had been circling for a long time, the moment the shape of it became impossible to look away from. The will was the answer to a question I hadn't known I was asking. Do my parents see me? Not the version of me they found convenient, not the reliable one, not the one who didn't require intervention. Me. Did they see me? The will said no. Clearly and legally and in writing. Notarized and filed. No. And once I understood that, I had a choice. I could keep showing up to the kitchen table, keep drinking the coffee that went cold, keep being the daughter who was fine, who required nothing, who could be allocated nothing and would nod and continue. Or I could stop. I stopped. I want to be honest about what the stopping cost. It cost the ordinary things. The holidays, the Sunday phone calls, the small, irreplaceable texture of being known by people who have known you since before you could speak. I missed my mother's laugh, which is specific and sudden and has always made me feel 7 years old. I missed my father's way of explaining things he understood, mathematics, investments, the weather, with the patience of a man who had spent a lifetime making complicated things clear. I missed the kitchen, which smelled the same every time regardless of what had changed outside it. I missed all of that. I let myself miss it. I did not let the missing make the decision for me. What I did with the 6 years was work, not in the way of throwing yourself into something to avoid feeling, more purposeful than that. I had identified, somewhere in the months after the kitchen table conversation, a gap in my field that I thought I could fill, a specific problem in how mid-size organizations handled operational risk assessment, and a methodology I had been developing in my head for 3 years that no one had built yet. I left my consulting firm at 36. I built the methodology. I packaged it into a consulting practice of my own. 3 employees at the start, then 7, then 14. Within 4 years, the practice had clients in 6 countries. Within 5 years, we had done work for 2 government bodies and published findings that were cited in 3 industry reports. I'm not telling you this to perform success. I'm telling you because it's relevant to what happened on the Thursday morning when the lawyer called, and because the 6 years were not, despite what some people assumed, me nursing a wound in the dark. They were me, without an audience, doing the thing I had always been capable of and had been waiting, without realizing it, for someone to notice. I stopped waiting. I built it myself. There were moments in those 6 years when Lauren called. Not often. 3 times in 6 years, which told me something about how much she had actually registered my absence versus how much she had simply continued occupying the center of our parents' attention. The calls were short. She asked if I was okay. She said our parents missed me. She said once that she thought the whole thing was unfair. I thanked her for saying so. I did not return to the table. My parents wrote twice. 2 letters, once each, in the first 2 years. My mother's letter was longer and more personal and harder to read. She said she hoped I was well. She said the house felt different. She said she had made my father's favorite for dinner and eaten it mostly alone because he had been working late, and something about the ordinariness of that detail had made her think of me. She did not say she had been wrong. My father's letter was shorter. He said he respected my decision to take space. He said he was proud of the work I was doing. He had seen the industry report. He had a friend in the sector who had mentioned my firm's name. He said he hoped I was happy. He did not say he had been wrong either. I read both letters more than once. I kept them in a folder in my desk drawer beneath the lease for my first office space and above the first signed client contract. I did not respond. I was building something. I needed the quiet to build it. I had lived my entire life making room for the noise of other people's needs, and for the first time I had the silence to hear my own thoughts clearly, and what my thoughts were saying very consistently was, keep going. Let me tell you what keeping going looked like, practically in the body of those 6 years. The first year was the hardest, not because of grief. Grief I could process, grief had a shape, but because of the disorientation of becoming someone who did not manage other people's feelings about her absence. I had spent decades being available, showing up, being the one who could be counted on to arrive without needing to be fetched. The first year, I kept having the reflex to call, Sunday evenings especially, which had been the call time, the built-in check-in, the rhythm of connection I had maintained through university and through every demanding stretch of work. On Sunday evenings, I would feel the pull of it, and I would sit with the pull and let it pass. It passed. Eventually, it became not absence, but something I had chosen. Those are different things. The second year, I hired my first employee. Her name is Chisholm. She is originally from Lagos. She has a master's in organizational behavior and the specific combination of precision and warmth that makes a person remarkable in a field built on understanding human systems. She is still with the practice. She runs our East Africa operations now. At some point in our first year working together, she said, "You are the most organized person I have ever met and also the hardest person to read." I took this as useful feedback and also as accurate. The third year, we won our first government contract. I was in a meeting room in a government building presenting to 8 people who had not expected me to know what I knew. And I watched the shift happen in real time. The recalibration, the moment when someone in the room stops assessing and starts listening. I had seen that shift many times. I had never been able to sit fully inside the satisfaction of it because there had always been someone I was managing the telling for, someone whose response to the news I was already pre-managing before the news had even happened. In the third year, I sat in my car afterward and felt the satisfaction completely. Nobody else in it, just mine. So I kept going. The call from the lawyer came on a Thursday morning in the spring of the 6th year. I was in my office on the 4th floor of a building I had leased 2 years prior when the practice had outgrown its original space. I had a board of advisors meeting in 40 minutes and a proposal due to a client in Zurich by end of week. My assistant knocked and said there was a Roger Holt on the phone, calling from a law office in my parents' city. I knew the name. Roger Holt had been my parents' estate attorney for at least 15 years. My father had mentioned him at some dinner years ago in the context of something boring and procedural that I had not paid attention to because I had not expected it to become relevant. I took the call. Roger Holt's voice was the voice of a man who had delivered complicated news many times and had learned to do it cleanly. He said he was calling regarding my parents' estate planning. He said there had been a development that required my involvement. He said he understood there had been a period of limited contact and that he was calling me directly at my parents' request. At my parents' request. I held the phone and looked out at the city and said, "Go ahead, Mr. Holt." He told me about the document. "Wait, before I tell you what was in that document, I need you to sit with where I was for a moment. 6 years. 2 letters I never answered. A practice I had built from nothing in the silence. A phone call from a lawyer I had not spoken to and had not expected to speak to. If you have ever walked away from something that was hurting you, Not dramatically, not with a speech, but quietly, completely, and without looking back. You know the particular combination of peace and loss that lives in that decision. The peace of not contorting yourself any further. The loss of what you had to leave to get there. If that's where you are right now, drop a comment. Tell me you're here. Because what I'm about to tell you about that document, about what my parents had done while I was away building the thing they told me I didn't need, I think it's going to matter to you. Let me tell you what I knew and didn't know. What I knew, my parents had rewritten their will in October, 6 years before, leaving everything to Lauren. I had been present for that disclosure. I had left without a word. What I did not know, 8 months after I left that kitchen, my parents had called Roger Holt again. I did not know that my mother had sat in his office on a Tuesday in June. Roger told me this precisely, with the specificity of a man working from notes, and had said that she wanted to change the document, that she had, over the previous 8 months, come to understand something about the decision they had made, that she needed to look at it differently. I did not know that my father had not objected. I did not know that what followed was not a simple revision, but 18 months of back and forth, of my mother and Roger Holt discussing the shape of what she wanted to do and why, of my father slowly, in his deliberate way, arriving at the same place, of Lauren being told, at some point in the second year, that there was a change being considered. I did not know any of this because no one had told me. My parents had not told me because, Roger explained carefully, my mother had wanted to make the change without condition. She did not want it to be an instrument to get me back. She did not want to call and say, "We have changed the will. Will you come home?" She wanted to change it because it was right, and she wanted me to come home, if I did, for a different reason. So they changed it in silence, and they waited. And the document they filed, the final version, completed in year 2 of my absence, and which had been sitting in Roger Holt's office ever since, had my name on every page. Not a portion, not a gesture, half. The house, the savings, the investments, split directly down the middle. A letter from my mother attached, unread by Roger, sealed with instructions that it be given to me along with the document. I sat in my office for a long time after Roger Holt finished talking, 4.5 years ago. My parents had corrected what they had done 4.5 years ago, while I was in year 2 of building the practice. While Chisholm was my only employee, and we were working out of a shared office space on the second floor of a building I could barely afford. While I was eating dinner alone most nights, and sleeping well, and building something real in the silence of a life that had stopped arranging itself around other people's assessments. While all of that was happening, my mother had sat in a lawyer's office on a Tuesday in June and said, "We got this wrong." And she had not called to tell me. She had not used it as leverage. She had not sent a third letter saying, "Look what we have done. Will you come back now?" She had filed the document and she had waited. I thought about that. The waiting. I had been keeping a silence. She had been keeping a different one. Not absence, but patience. The silence of someone who has made a correction and is waiting to see whether the correction is enough. We had been, for 4.5 years, sitting in parallel silences that were saying different things. Then I asked Roger Holt when they had completed the document because I needed the number to be real. He told me the date. I did the math. 4 years, 7 months, 11 days ago. I looked out at the city. My board meeting was in 22 minutes. I had a proposal due to Zurich. I had 14 employees who would arrive in that building tomorrow morning and whose ability to do their work depended in various ways on the decisions I made in this office. None of it felt far away. I want to say it all felt small in that moment, the way things do in movies when revelation arrives. It didn't. It all felt real and present, and mine, the practice, the clients, the Zurich proposal. I had built all of it. It remained mine. The document changed none of that. What it changed was something harder to name. "Mr. Holt," I said, "why are you calling me now? If the document has been in place for 4 years." "Your mother's health," he said. "There have been some concerns. She asked me to make contact. She wanted you to know about the document before—" He paused, choosing words. "Before any urgency made it difficult to separate the two things. She was very clear about that. She wanted you to know it wasn't conditional." I held the phone. "She wanted me to know it wasn't conditional," I repeated. "Yes," Roger Holt said. Those were her exact words. There was one more thing. The sealed letter. Roger Holt mentioned it at the end of the call. My mother had attached a personal letter to the document, sealed, unread by anyone, with instructions that it be delivered to me directly. He asked whether he should mail it or whether I would prefer to collect it. I collected it. The following week, when I drove to his office to review the document in person, I sat in a conference room with the sealed envelope on the table in front of me for 15 minutes before I opened it. I'm not going to tell you everything in that letter. Some things belong to the people they were written for, and that letter was written for me. What I will tell you is this. My mother wrote 4 pages by hand, which for a woman of her precision and economy is the equivalent of a much longer document. She wrote about the October afternoon and what she had been thinking. When she said what she said, she wrote about the months after I left. She wrote about sitting in Roger Holt's office and realizing in the middle of explaining to him what she wanted to change and why, that the act of explaining it out loud was the act of finally hearing herself, finally applying to herself the honest scrutiny she had been applying to everything else for 63 years. She wrote, "I told Roger I wanted to fix the document. What I understood, while I was telling him, was that the document was never the real problem. The real problem was that I had looked at you, my daughter, who I have known since before you could speak, and I had seen your capability and called it sufficiency. I had seen your independence and called it contentment. I had confused what you could do alone with what you needed, and I am sorry. Not for the document, for the confusion, for the years of it." 4 pages. The most my mother had ever said to me about what she saw when she looked at me. I sat in Roger Holt's conference room, and I read it twice, and then I folded it and put it in my bag, and I drove to my office, and I worked for the rest of the day. That evening, I called her. "I want to stop here and tell you something." When I describe that phone call to people, they often expect this to be the moment of vindication, the moment where I felt proven right, felt the scales tip, felt whatever satisfaction a person is supposed to feel when they find out the people who hurt them change their minds. That's not what I felt. What I felt was grief, clean, sudden grief, not for the money, not for the document, but for 4.5 years in which my mother had been sitting with this knowledge, and neither of us had known the other had changed, for the parallel silences, for all the ordinary moments that had kept happening in that kitchen, while I was on a 4th floor, in a building I had leased with my own name on the lease, building something in the quiet, and, underneath the grief, something else, something I took a few days to identify, relief, the specific relief of being seen, of the model being revised, of my parents having looked at what they had done and said, "This was wrong," and corrected it not because I demanded it, not because I argued my case, but because they found their way there themselves. That mattered to me more than I expected it to. I called my mother that evening. She answered on the 2nd ring. We talked for 2 hours and 19 minutes. I know because my phone logged the call and I looked at it afterward, sitting in my car in the parking garage beneath my building, unable to quite bring myself to go home yet. The concrete walls around me and the fluorescent lights above and the specific quiet of a parking garage after hours. That is where I sat and processed the fact that 6 years had compressed into one phone call and I was, somehow, on the other side of it. My mother cried, not at the start. She held herself together for the first 20 minutes with the discipline of a woman who has always considered composure a form of respect. We were careful with each other, formal in the way of people navigating a language they once spoke fluently and are finding again, testing words before placing them. She asked about the practice. I told her, not the polished version, the real version. The difficult first year, the government contract, Chisholm, the Zurich client, what it felt like to be in a meeting room and have someone stop assessing and start listening. She asked questions that were precise and interested. The questions of a woman who had taught mathematics for 20 years and knew how to follow a structure. And I talked, really talked, about work in a way I had not talked to her in years. Not reporting, not summarizing for approval, just talking. And she listened. Then she said my name. Just my name. In the way she said it when I was small, when she came to check on me in the dark. Not because anything was wrong, but just to confirm I was there, just to make sure. Something in both of us let go at the same time. She did not apologize in those first 20 minutes. She apologized later when we were past the formality. She said, "I was wrong about what you needed. I see that now. I've seen it for a long time, and I didn't know how to tell you without it being about the money, and I didn't want it to be about the money." "It was never about the money," I said. "I know," she said. "I know that now." "You knew it then, too," I said. "You just didn't say it." She was quiet. "Yes," she said finally. "I knew it then, too." That honesty was the thing I had needed from her. Not the document, not the correction. That honesty, the acknowledgement not just that they had been wrong, but that they had known, on some level, in some part of themselves, that the model had been inaccurate and they had filed the document and said what they had said anyway. It was the hardest thing for her to say. She said it anyway. I drove to my parents' house the following weekend. My mother met me at the door. Thinner than I remembered, moving more carefully but with the same eyes, the same laugh when it finally came. My father shook my hand and then pulled me into a hug that lasted longer than any hug I could remember from him, which told me, more precisely than words, what 6 years had cost him, too. Lauren was not there. My mother had called her to say I was coming, and Lauren had said she needed a few days. I understood that. The revised will had changed something in their dynamic, too. Had shifted the shape of an arrangement that Lauren had lived inside for years, had perhaps built an identity around. That was not my crisis to manage. What I know is that Lauren called me 2 weeks after my visit, and that we talked, and that the conversation was uncomfortable in the specific way of two people being honest with each other for the first time after many years of performing a version of sisterhood that suited the family's existing story. She said she had not known the will had been revised. That was true. Our parents had told her a change was being considered, but not finalized. She said she thought the original decision had been unfair and that she had said so at the time and our parents had not listened. I don't know how much of that is accurate and how much is the revision that happens naturally when circumstances change and we need our own history to reflect well on us. It didn't matter. What mattered was that she was on the phone being real, and I received that. We are in contact now. Not close in the way we might have been, not yet. But contact. Real contact, which is more than performance. And I will take real over performed at any level of intensity. My mother's health. There had been a cardiac event in the spring of the 6th year, minor but clarifying in the way that health events are clarifying. She had been told to slow down, to walk more, to manage her stress. She had, characteristically, turned the walking into a project, a specific route, a specific time, a specific playlist. She told me about the playlist on one of our early Tuesday calls with a detail and enthusiasm that made me laugh, which made her go quiet for a moment in a way that told me she had been waiting to hear me laugh. She is well. She walks every morning. She calls on Tuesdays. My father has started sending me articles, the kind he used to share at dinners. Things he found interesting, things he thought I would find interesting, forwarded with brief notes. The first one arrived 3 weeks after my return. The note said, "Thought of you." That was the whole note. He is not a man who needs many words once he has found the right ones. I go to the house once a month. The kitchen still smells the same. My mother makes tea I don't need, and my father explains something about the news, and I sit at the table where 6 years ago I had left a cup of coffee going cold. I drink the tea now. I have thought carefully about what this story is, because I think it's possible to tell it in a way that makes it about the document, about the legal vindication, about my name being on every page. That would be the wrong story. The document was a symbol of something. My parents sitting with what they had done and deciding without pressure, without negotiation, to correct it. That mattered. But the document did not change what the 6 years had built. It did not give me the practice, the clients, the methodology that is now used by organizations in 6 countries. It did not give me the quiet in which I had learned, for the first time, to hear myself clearly. It did not give me the knowledge, durable and mine in the way that earned things are, that I had built something real in the absence of anyone's approval or validation. I had always known I was capable. What the 6 years gave me was the proof that was entirely my own. The will had said I didn't need anything, and in a way I had taken that as a challenge, not in anger, but in the calm, determined way I approach most things. And I had proven it precisely wrong by needing nothing except what I built myself. That's not a triumphant ending. Triumph implies the other person lost, and I don't experience it that way. My parents are older and moving more carefully, and they sit in the kitchen I grew up in, and I sit with them once a month, and my mother laughs her sudden laugh, and my father explains the weather with patient precision, and the ordinary, irreplaceable texture of being known by people who have known you since before you could speak. I have that again. I had it, and I walked away from it when keeping it required me to be less than I was, and I came back to it when it had been repaired enough to hold me properly, not because of a document, because my mother picked up the phone on the second ring and said my name, the way she said it when I was small. That was always going to be enough. I just needed to wait until it was offered honestly. If you are in a version of this, if you have been told explicitly or implicitly, in words or in documents or in the accumulated small evidence of a lifetime, that you don't need anything, that you're fine, that your quiet competence has been mistaken for not requiring care, I want you to hear this. Being easy is not the same as being content. Being capable is not the same as needing nothing. The person who does not shout for help still has needs. They are just the kind that require someone to look rather than someone to respond to an alarm. You are allowed to walk away from the table when the table is not set for you. You are allowed to go and build the thing yourself. You are allowed to come back if and when the table is reset on your own terms and in your own time. And you are allowed in the meantime to need nothing from the people who told you that you didn't, and to discover in that radical self-sufficiency exactly how much you are capable of when you stop arranging yourself around other people's models of who you are. That's what I found in 6 years. That was worth every one of them. Thank you for staying with me to the end of this one. If it landed somewhere real, if it put words to something you've been carrying, leave me a comment. Tell me where you are. I read every single one. The next story is right below this one. I'll see you there.